as General Smith said, is Ray Mason, a senior fellow at AUSA. I served for 35 years in the Army, retired in 2014. As I look back on it, it kind of went that fast. I can remember being a lieutenant in Germany in 1979, and man, here I am, gray hair and all that. Not every day went that fast, but generally looking back on it. Last job was DAG4. For the past 8 years, I ran Army Emergency Relief. Second best job I ever had in my Army career. What's the best job? Battalion Command, the 82nd. Tough to beat that. So my mission today is to serve as your moderator for this outstanding panel, Institutional Training and Transformation. I cannot think of any more qualified leaders than these four gentlemen to discuss our topic. This panel is made up of senior Army commanders at our TRADOC schools, as well as two highly acclaimed industry partners from AeroVironment and Lockheed Martin. The main theme of the panel is to discuss the U.S. Army and specifically Training and Doctrine Command, gotta put them on spectacles, with the help of industry's best practices and technology, so we can transform while in contact, how we train soldiers and units, as well as transforming the institutional training base to include updating doctrine. Our panelists, to my right, to your left, thus creating the mirror effect, so let's remember that. Major General Christopher Beck, he is the Commanding General of the United States Army Maneuver Support Center of Excellence at Fort Leonard Wood. Chad Chastain, Director of Business Development and Army Programs at AeroVironment. Colonel Glenn Henke, he's the Commandant of the United States Army Air Defense Center and Chief of Air Defense Artillery. And last but not least, Doug Booth, the Vice President of Training Logistics at Lockheed Martin. To provide just a quick little background on this panel, let me provide some broad thoughts that each of these individuals will develop further in their comments. And we'll certainly leave time for questions from the audience. We've got some prepared questions that were submitted beforehand as well. So TRADOC, obviously in coordination with Futures Command, is increasing the lethality of units by developing and fielding technology, doctrine, TTP, and actual equipment solutions, all informed by directly by current events and current threats. TRADOC is also working hard to take operational lessons learned from today's conflicts so we can transform training, program with instructions in the schoolhouses, leader development, and doctrine in order to drive irreversible change. As the Army continues to transition from 20 plus years of counterinsurgency to large-scale operations, TRADOC and our industry partners are taking lessons learned from Ukraine, Syria, Israel, Gaza, and other places, especially in drones and AI and machine learning, to ensure emerging warfighter doctrine and capability fully capture and account for the absolute latest events, technologies on those battlefields. American industry leaders are working on advanced robotics, unmanned systems, launch FX, loitering munitions, autonomy, common control systems, again, with lessons observed and hopefully learned from the past 5 years or so of conflicts in Europe and the Levant. The Army can accelerate change by leveraging industry partners that possess decades of experience delivering, as I said earlier, autonomous unmanned solutions and lethal effects to dozens of partners around the world, including hands-on qualification training and train the trainer. Additionally, the work industry is doing in simulation and modeling, and most recently in artificial intelligence, will inform our Army solutions to this challenging combat environment. Let me just make a comment from the standpoint of our industry partners. A lot of times we keep them at an arm's length because there's all these policies and rules and you're worried about getting in trouble. And I understand that. I lived in that world, as I said, for a long time. But they're part of the team. You got to include them early. They got to be in the room. Yeah, you got to follow all that stuff. But if we hold them at an arm's length, and that's really what AUSA is all about, does such a magnificent job about it. But you got to have it. You got to train your leaders early on in their career. Yes, I understand. I remember when I was at G4, you know, my guys would all get nervous when an industry partner came in. Oh, you can't talk to him, you got to talk to them, that kind of stuff. I get it. I talk to anybody, anytime. Most people know about me. But that is so key. You got to bring them in early, and that's why we've got two industry partners on the panel. So now I ask each of our panelists to discuss their specific thoughts on this topic, and I'll first turn it over to General Beck.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this team. So at the Maneuver Support Center, we have the proponency for engineers, MPs, chemical. We also are the protection warfighting function current lead and really integrated as the systems approach moves forward with formation-based layer protection, and then also do a lot of training in the Homeland Defense element. But as I look at the question that really we're here to talk about today, so the current pace of transformation in the Army now is faster than I've ever seen it. But as we heard the Army G3 say yesterday, it's probably not fast enough. And a lot of the current transformation in contact is designed to start at unit level. A lot of it is ground up. Yes, they're getting kit and capabilities from the Army in many cases, but they're also ground up level engagements and technology that we're seeing every single day. And frankly, if you don't have the institutional Army embedded in that, as you described, it's a team sport. The days where, if you're a little older in this audience, we always said, well, it'll come back to the institutional Army when you come back for PME. It'll get back here to big Army at the right time. That's not the mindset anymore. When you look at all of the different TIC organizations right now, next to each one of them is the team that you see represented up here. It's got to be the institutional Army, represented by TRADOC, CAC, all the COEs, the CFTs, the CDIDs. All of that element has got to be nested completely with every FORCECOM unit, and the labs and academia and our industry partners have to be right there. We've got to ensure that we're learning not just the materiel domain lessons, but the entirety of doctrine, organization, training, and leader development. And that's what makes these so important. Again, if you're a little older, when you had a unit-based action and you drove it from your perspective, it lasted about as long as you were in command. And then the next person did their change command inventories, walked to the tool room and said, what the heck is that thing? I don't know, the previous guy wanted it. And that's where it died. But if all of those elements are integrated in TIC, which is what makes it so powerful, then we're learning the right lessons for our Army, and they're being institutionalized. They're being leveraged to drive all those aspects of DOCMO-PF so that we can make the right changes for our Army that are lasting. And then, sir, you mentioned a lot of things from the institutional Army and how we deliver training. I'm not going to lie to anybody. There are still challenges with things like POI development. We are still a resource-driven organization, and our models are all resource-driven. But at the same time, every one of the centers of excellence, every one of the commandants are making real-time changes to ensure that our young leaders are graduating and they're ready to lead in our Army. We understand the dependencies across all of our organizations are unlike anything they've been in the past. For example, at the Maneuver Support Center, we're ensuring that when our young leaders graduate, regardless of the rank they are, they've got to be able to talk about things like protection, things like the electromagnetic spectrum, things like data analytics and data literacy. They've all got to be able to talk that, and I can guarantee all of my peers are doing the same thing. So we all continue to look at different ways we can make our training relevant. So you mentioned lessons observed. CAC recently did a sprint in Ukraine where they gathered a really intense period of all lessons across all of our functions. And yes, they brought that back and they briefed the Chief of Staff and other Army senior leaders, as you would expect. But it also immediately rolled down to every COE and every regiment. And the question was, what are you going to do in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? What are we doing today to change our education and be sure that our cadre, our small group leaders, our instructors are relevant in the current operating environment, but that they also ensure that our young cadre, our young students are. So when they graduate, we have that connective tissue where they're confident to reach back to us and say, hey, this worked, hey, this didn't work. We've got to have that dialogue, and the institutional Army has to be much further forward than we've been in the past. And again, back to the industry partners, academia, and labs. If you look at every one of the TIC experiments going on right now, and panels yesterday said this, the key to success is getting this equipment to the soldiers early. In the past, we did a lot of soldier touch points that brought 1 or 2 soldiers from units back to the place where we were testing. And we're trying now to really get beyond that. We're trying to take the equipment to the formations so that the formations can learn about it. Because, as I said earlier, the key is not the M domain on its own. If we're not learning formation-based lessons, if we're not understanding how this is going to impact doctrine, what does this do for the organization or training and leader development, we're not truly embedding this learning across our Army, and we're not going to be able to sustain it. So at the end of the day, this is a team sport. We require everybody, and the nexus at the unit level is where all of this has to start. So, sir, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this discussion. This is really through TIC and deliberate transformation and ultimately continuous transformation, driving lethality in our warfighting, allowing us to deliver combat-ready formations, and allowing us to do continuous transformation that we all need in our Army. So thank you, sir, for the opportunity.
Chad, to you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Chad Chastain. I retired out of the Army with 32 years of service, including field artillery, where I was enlisted, and then I spent the rest of my time in Army Aviation. Half of my time in Army Aviation was spent in the 160th and the Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Very grateful to be here, and I've only been out of the Army for a year and a half, so it's very exciting to be on this side of the side of the fence, where what my job is to do is to represent our company and interact with the Army. You probably don't know our company name as well as you know some of the products. AeroVironment, we are the ones that sell Switchblade, loitering munitions, kamikaze drones, things like that. We're very much tied in with training people going into the fight or helping out with the fight in the Ukraine. Been over there since the beginning, as well as every theater around the world with advanced robotic systems. So what I do is I go to the user reps, I go to aviation seated, maneuver seated. I was in Detroit last week talking to PEO GCS teams about what are the challenges facing our Army and what can we do to close those capability gaps, potentially with solutions, at least offer the Army those solutions. So here's what I'm learning as I go around the Army and talk to commanders and user reps, is that the current operating environment is highly contested, congested, it's violent, and it's chaotic. First contact is made by robotic systems that can see, sense, and strike from virtually any direction. The adversary can strike from standoff distances that far outreach the range of our conventional systems, like armor, artillery, Hellfires. In response, the Army is modernizing at echelon, as you see here on the slide, with unmanned systems, launch effects, loitering munitions, autonomy, and common control solutions. The problem is the adversary seems to be adapting at a faster cycle rate. Our slower cycle rate creates a capability gap for our forces in a near-peer fight. So how do we prepare our soldiers to be decisive in the environment? We equip them. We arm them with the necessary tools to seize, retain, and exploit the initiative. We equip them, but not just with material solutions. You're probably expecting the industry guy up here to talk about all the different products that his company can offer. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we equip them with skill-based training. We need to teach our soldiers the basics of employing advanced robotics at the centers of excellence to develop fundamental skills, adaptive skills as a part of the combined arms team. So if we could go to the next slide, and this will be my last one. The boy David faced the giant. He faced the giant, but before that, what did he do? He faced the lion and he faced the bear. And so when he faced the giant, he came in with unerring confidence that comes with training. The reps and sets required to become one with the weapon. We're not facing a giant today, but we do have a capability gap between us and our adversaries, which is growing. We can close the gap by transforming our training in contact, modernizing our training programs of instruction at the speed of relevance. Robotics, I argue, represents the new sling and stone, and we need to teach our soldiers to wield the latest weapons of war, starting at the schoolhouse. And to close this up, the Army can accelerate change by leveraging industry partners. We possess years of delivering robotic systems, and we have been training folks around the world. And we're not the only company that does it. We're in 55 countries around the world training advanced robotics systems. Why not the U.S. soldiers as well? Transform our training and contact to win the current and future fight. That's all I have, sir. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Chad. Colonel Hankey?
Good morning, everyone. So the Air Defense Artillery Branch is really coming to transforming contact from a somewhat different angle. And some of that is, really based on three factors. First, we've been already well down the road of a multi-year modernization effort, in that delivered transformation space. The second, and closely tied to that is the material that we've been developing. As we field Integrated Air Missile Defense Battle Command System, IBCS, we have the opportunity to organize, fight, and operate in ways that we've never been able to do. The trick is, how do you build a training base that can actually teach that? And the third factor is, what the threat has been doing and the increasing relevance and urgency with the Air Defense Branch. And we've seen in Ukraine, Israel, CENTCOM's operations in both OIR and the Red Sea, and then to say nothing of what the pacing threat has been doing in this space. So, those three factors have, been pressing on us for a while. So, the question is, how do we keep up, and more importantly, how do we accelerate and go faster? Just looking at it from the doctrine perspective, while we are doing the things that all COEs would do and you would expect us to do at any time. We're just finished the update of our key capstone document 3-01, but we're also looking at heavily on both Army techniques publications and training circulars for our gunnery. And IBCS allows us to do these things a little bit differently. So, and really, the gunnery doctrine for that is fire control gunnery. And as I add new capabilities, like a new radar, LTAMs, or IBCS, or other sensors and effectors, I don't give them a new gunnery, because the fire control gunnery is still the same. I just adjust the specific engagements for that unit. So that's a different way of doing gunnery that we've never had to do before. The same thing with the Army techniques publications. As we bring on new capability, I'm not going to make an IBC or an IFPIC manual. Maybe there'll be an appendix to the existing ATP. That's just one example. Another area where we've gone really fast, iterating, is on counter UAS. So, Fire Center of Excellence published the first counter UAS ATP techniques publication in August 2023, and 14 months later, we submitted the first revision. Right now, we are working with the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate in order to put this as a digitized version of this, so that we can get much quicker and better feedback from units on how, and then iterate faster on making those changes, because we foresee having to change that document with great regularity. On the training side, in response to everything that we've seen, we're reorganizing our mission essential task lists, our combined arms training strategies, and more importantly, all of our PME schools. Starting with our NCO schools, taking those things that we previously only taught to master gunners and bringing that into the basic curriculum for each of the NCOES schools. Additionally, increasing the skills of our warrant officers. And then finally, on the leader development education, we're revising and transforming our master gunner courses and changing some of our legacy courses that built expert knowledge in one weapon system and changing that into our IMD planners course to replace Top Gun, because what we've assessed is the skill that we need does not necessarily know everything about a specific weapon system and a specific radar. The skill I need to train is, how do you bring all this together and have the maximum effect. Last thing I will say is with the Joint Counter U.S. University, which is also under the Fire Center of Excellence, is an example where we've been able to go much faster than anyone would have expected. We went initial operating capability in beginning of FY24, and part of that is to get around this whole you can't train on capabilities until you have a milestone C decision. We created something called the interim POI. So instead of being a task-based approach, which is the traditional TRADOC approach, we are a topics-based approach. And that allows us to iterate on these courses much faster. We built 3 courses so far, and they don't look a lot like they did when we started just really 15 months ago, because we're trying to keep up. The key to all this is iterating quickly. So I'm going to publish an Army Techniques publication for IBCS, or excuse me, IMD, and I fully expect to revise that within a year. And that's just what we have to get ready as the new normal. So it's just some of the examples of what we've been doing at FCO.
Thank you, Colonel Henke. All right, Doug?
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me on the panel here. And when the Colonel's walking through the examples there of radars, don't forget you could also do the Lockheed Martin Sentinel-E4 or Q-53 if you need to. So So Doug Booth, Lockheed Martin Vice President, Training and Logistics, where we focused on advanced training for both military and commercial platforms. And you got to think of it as live, virtual, and constructive training across the 4 domains. So if you think about F-35, F-16 training, weapons ranges, Black Hawk from a ground perspective. We also do the Aegis weapons system training on the Navy side and obviously space. I also have the privilege, because I work in Orlando, Florida, the home of Disney and a bunch of different studios there and Universal. I sit on the board for the National Center for Simulation, where you combine government, academia, and industry together to really advance the future of modeling, simulation, and training. Kind of think of it as a hub, an innovation hub for Florida, and we work with a lot of other states as well. But when I think about transformation, it kind of starts with some key elements, and I like to focus first on the simulation and virtual reality, or VR, and how can we better utilize these cutting-edge technologies. It really creates a realistic environment with real-world scenarios for our soldiers to practice in, and they can practice in this safe and controlled environments. As many reps and sets as possible. The example I'll give, since we'll be using a lot of military examples, while we're up here today, I'm going to give one for National Football League. Football, I'm sure or most of us are, follow football. There was a young kid, played college in Arizona, went through LSU, where he won the Heisman Trophy. He was selected second when he came out of LSU, went to the Washington Commanders, where he turned that team around from a 3-win season to where they competed this past year in the NFC Championship. That's Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels has adopted virtual reality in his weekly rhythms, and he's using the VR goggles to look at defenses and defensive schemes. He runs them at normal speed, so he gets used to it, and then he speeds them up, 1.2, 1.5 times at real time. And he just won Rookie of the Year. So we can think about, it being used from a sports perspective. How can we adopt it, across the, for the different warfighters? Second area would be live exercises, because you can't do everything from a VR perspective. You have to get hands-on. And I think that you really need to start simulating and doing more of this, the actual combat scenarios, because I think that's where you're really going to help develop the critical thinking that we need against these near peers, faster decision making, and the teamwork that we need across all the domains. And the example that I'm going to give there is from a PEO STRI perspective. They started to look at the Miles system. Miles has been around. I think everyone's a user of the Miles system, since the 1980s. They're looking at a new geo-pairing capability called SimRes. It's more realistic, and not only does it allow you to get better results from your weapon, there's also a live training system that goes into that. So I, as a soldier, get my avatar scanned in. It can follow me around, through the force-on-force live scenario. It can tell me how many hits I had, how many misses, am I shooting to the left, where it was like orienting my weapon at another person, and I can, just keep track of the whole live training capability there through that. So that's the second, is making sure that we're doing some more with live exercises. Adaptive learning. We all can't learn at the same pace. Jill might be able to go in, read a chapter, test out, real quick that night. But I might need it taught to me in a different way, maybe it's broken into smaller sections. And that's adaptive learning, because not all of us learn at the same pace or in the same way. And it's a way, by using adaptive learning, to make our training much more effective. And I would just say the last area that we would look at is analysis and performance analysis. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of analytics when it comes to looking at myself, or looking at the classroom, or looking at the live exercises, and assessing the effectiveness of the training. We've got to make sure that we're investing the time wisely, and not only looking at it from the class itself, but looking at it as the cognitive load on the warfighter itself. When is it too much per individual? And so I would say that those are the 4 key components that we think that we need to keep focusing on: is simulation and VR, the live exercises, the adaptive learning to make it more effective to the individual, and then the analysis and the performance analysis of both the individual and the classes.
Thanks, Doug. Hey, I'm glad you brought up the Commanders. I've been a Redskins/Commanders fan since 1970. When I first did it, it was Sonny Jurgensen and Billy Gilmer.
Yeah.
Been some tough decades in there. We had a couple rebuilding decades, but I think with Jaden, we really got a guy that's going to take us
Right.
to the Super Bowl.
Imagine if they had VR back then, Sonny would
Yes, no
light it
kidding.
up.
So we've got some questions here that were submitted beforehand. We've got some more. So please, as I said, submit your questions. But we'll go down the team here and do a kind of a round robin thing. So General Beck, so you provided a pretty good broad view of what's going on at the Maneuver Sports Center. Can you give some specific examples, perhaps maybe down at the 1,000-foot level, about how you're taking those observed lessons, hopefully learned lessons, roll them into TIC learnings, and specifically leader development, training, and doctrine? So some specific details for the audience I think would be helpful.
No, absolutely. Thanks, sir. And I'll go back to some of the engineering efforts. And General Hodney, who's in the audience, briefed the engineering, the breaching that we just did out at NTC much better than I ever can, so I won't even try and repeat that. But just to take that a step further, so the 65th Engineer Battalion in Hawaii, as part of the 25th, is just transforming, and they're going from, we're elevating engineers from where, in their case, they supported a BCT directly, to now they're a division asset. They just finished an iteration with the 25th and wrote an outstanding summary that they shared with our entire team at the Maneuver Support Center. We're already looking at ways we can take those lessons and roll them back into the pre-command courses and potentially even PME to integrate things they're learning that we may not have taught historically because the leaders weren't at that level. Similarly, we're working right now with the Reserve and the Guard. They both have theater MP commands. And one of the gaps we think the Army has significantly is at the theater protection level. So we're experimenting with them with how do we take the lessons they're learning through the engagements they're having in warfighting exercises and other training exercises, and taking a direct look at that with how do we change our PME within the MPs to potentially focus it more on protection, while at the same time driving changes to O within those current organizations at a no cost to the Army, so that we can tackle that theater protection capability discussion. And as Glenn said, we're making changes in doctrine as well. Something our boss says routinely is doctrine right now is changing at a pace like it's never changed before. I'm really excited about ADP 337, the protection baseline doctrine for our Army, and I've had a discussion with several key leaders, to include General Hodney, about how excited I am that goes directly from today into the future warfighting concept. And I'll steal from General Hodney. He talks routinely about if the future force, if the glide path for the future force isn't aligned with today's glide path, the two will obviously never meet. And so when you look at doctrine, and again, we're excited at the Maneuver Sports Center with the protection doctrine, because it's absolutely on a glide path to get to formation-based layer protection. So as we integrate protection into the common core of what we're doing for our three regiments at the Maneuver Sports Center, but also across the rest of CAC, what they're learning today, what the young leaders are learning today about the protection warfighting function will absolutely transition into the formation-based layer protection that they need to think about as they look at the future warfighting concept. So thanks for that question, sir.
Hey, Chad, this question is pretty detailed, but you're a smart guy with that slide you built earlier. You probably should show that again. That's pretty awesome, that slide.
That's an Army slide.
You didn't build the Army.
No, that was 3 CDIDs came together to make that one.
Okay, well, the Army divested Shadow, the Group 3 solution, in FY24, creating a capability gap across the force. Future tactical UAS replaces Shadow, but doesn't field until FY27 or later, potentially. The Army intends to field Group 3 solutions this year, which creates a mixed formation of capabilities. Based on that situation, what is an optimal solution for the Army to rapidly train and integrate all those various capabilities across the force to try to integrate it?
Yeah, thanks so much, General Mason. That's awesome. So what's an optimal solution for the Army? So I say first, mixed capabilities across the Army, in my opinion, is not really a problem. I can't think of a division commander that I've ever met that would turn down a Group 3 capability just because it looked different than a Group 3 solution in another division. Given the size and scale of the Army, it's impossible to instantly field a like system and capability to the entire force simultaneously. Fielding takes years, so how do we get ahead of that? I'd say when I was an Army aviator, I routinely was exposed to multiple different variants of a Black Hawk and Russian helicopter cockpits, you know, and you had to just move from one to the other. So 2 solutions I would recommend if we haven't done so already, but I understand we haven't, is create a Group 3 and above 15 series aviation MOS, a universal operator. Everything Group 3 and above could be trained by one MOS. To deliver the capability for the division commander, brigade commanders. Why? First of all, the technological advancements, particularly in autonomy, planning software, the simulation, as we're talking about, ground control station, just reduces the task on the operator. The cognitive load is simply not there. We aren't putting 2 soldiers in a big box like we used to. Now it's a desktop. So a large archaic ground control station with OEM software is now replaced by laptop systems, and soldiers intuitively grasp this. I have 2 sons, one's 24, one's 19. So the video game industry is $200 billion a year, video game industry. Compare that to the movie industry, which is just over 50 billion. The music industry is 35 billion. Our soldiers, our sons and daughters are getting a lot of reps and sets in this UI environment. No, video games is not warfare. However, the interfaces are very similar. We just loaned an aircraft to a combat engineer brigade out there. They're at NTC right now. We bailed an aircraft, and it's a term for loaning an aircraft so they could fight a Group 2 system. It's a rotary wing helicopter called Vapor. And they got trained, they got their hands on, and you know what? Those soldiers figured out that software very quickly. So we're playing there was a Call of Duty scenario. We got my dad on it, and my dad's 72 years old. He's got 42 years of government service, and he couldn't get off the beach in D-Day. Then my youngest son jumped on there. He pretty much decimated the entire Nazi army in one afternoon. And that is just the difference between soldiers now and in the past. One thing I'll throw at you is we're very much involved in the HMIF, Human Machine Integrated Formations. We have a common control solution and common grip. And that's a grip solution where a soldier just pulls the device down, and it's an app-based, it's agnostic, vendor agnostic. And we just did a demonstration at Quantico last week. A Marine, an active duty Marine, launched a quadcopter using their handheld device, actually a Tab Active 3, a Samsung with our metal grip around it, Tomahawk Robotics. Controlled that quadcopter, found the target, identified it, launched a Stalker, which is from a competing company from Edge Autonomy. They make great kit. And so now the Marine's flying 2 systems autonomously. And verifies the target, launches a Switchblade 300 loitering munition, kills the target, does the BDA, brings the assets back. One Marine did all that, see, sense, and strike. What I'm telling you is, I don't think having disparate technologies in your formations is as big a problem as not having the capability in your formation. And I believe the soldiers today can train through those differences. That's all I have. Thanks, Rick.
No, I think that's great. Our young kids are phenomenal.
They are.
They can handle more than one thing for sure.
Yeah, you don't want to be stuck on the beach all day, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Colonel Henke, it's a great question from the audience. It could get in, obviously, the classified area. You'll avoid that, obviously. It says, what was lessons learned from the successful defense against the Iranian April 2024 missile attack? Put you on the spot there.
So some of that is, some of the lessons were things that we had known for a while in terms of the requirements of layer capabilities. The principles and tenets of air defense are very sound in terms of those things, mass mixed mobility, integration, and the layered capabilities. So it sort of validated that. Some of the things that were unique was the integration of some of the joint capabilities, both from detection and then also, understanding that it was not only just a missile attack, but also a significant UAS raid at the same time. And then, it was the bringing together of the joint capabilities that was able to affect that. Clearly, there was a multinational element of that, but the command relationships and the procedures we've developed, what the things that AA and BCs do for both JFACs and the Joint Force Commanders, it did validate that. Some of the unique lessons, probably not for this venue, but those, fundamentally did kind of validate the fundamentals are sound. The specific application, as you can bring with new technology, such as how do I get a more affordable interceptor, not just from a ground-based system, but from an air-based system. That is one of the things that came out of that afterwards, to include the use of APKWS off of manned aircraft, Air Force aircraft, as opposed to just in a ground service airport, which we have been using for a couple years.
I mean, what an amazing defense. It was just phenomenal when you think about it. Doug, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here as an industry guy. So if you could change one thing about military training, and of course you got a military audience, what would that be?
Oh, probably gonna be difficult to change just one thing. I think that there's, when it comes to some of the best practices that I think that we need to focus on. We work a lot with countries around the globe, and one of the things that I know is that the U.S. military does training better than everyone else. You always require a comprehensive approach, and I think that it's whether you're embracing the technology, continuous learning, scenario-based training, leadership development. I think the one thing that I would probably focus the most on changing is the embracement of technology and making sure that your soldiers and warfighters have that capability to take home with them, so that they're continuously learning on a nightly basis, reps and sets. I think that's probably the one area that I would focus on the most.
Okay, good, thanks, Doug. General Beck, so you talked a little bit about industry labs and academia and how important that is and the partnership. I think this question really relates to how do you have a feedback system? So how does the Army feed to the industry labs and academia what we're seeing, so they could be informed and develop those great industry partners and leverage their amazing capability, and then they feed it back to you. So that loop system, how do you go about doing that in your particular area?
That's a good question. I think you described the end of it really well. It's got to be a loop system. So I think the first thing is you've got to have everybody together when the capability is written. And I am not an acquisition professional, but a lot of the different professionals have talked about this over the last day and a half. We have got to think about what is the problem that we're trying to solve and bring that to industry instead of this is how we want you to solve the problem. So we've got to start with that more open question, and then we've got to all be part of whatever the experiment is that's going to drive the answers to that. And in this case, we're talking about transformation in contact. As I said earlier, we've all got to be there. So again, I'll go back to the breach, which we just showed at Project Convergence 5. The reality was we had a lot of different pieces of material working over the last year through a lot of different experiments, and then brought them all together to ensure that we understood what are the doctrine, organization, training, and leader development implications of that. And we had industry along the way the entire time. Many in the audience may have heard of the Sandhills experiment, which the 20th Engineer Brigade did underneath 18th Airborne Corps. That frankly changed the thought process of robotics and autonomous capabilities within one of the most challenging and high-risk things we do, a combined arms breach. And so taking that problem set and looking at it, and it did take a lot of effort, a lot of material-focused effort, and that's where we're continuing to learn. That was a great experiment that did exactly what it was designed to do. But now we're taking that with industry, with academia, and through all of our process in the institutional Army, and taking that back and learning the rest of the .mil PF lessons. So I think it's a matter of bringing everybody together at every step of it. The industry's got to tell us that solution is feasible. or it's not feasible. And like I said, it's got to start with an open discussion up front, and we've got to help define the problem clearly so we can leverage things that industry may be better at than we are. And let them help us solve the problem, not tell us how to solve it, and iterate continuously throughout. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think that you're spot on. And my experience was sometimes I'd have industry partners come in and say, I got the solution to all your problems in my briefcase right here. Really? You know, we got pretty smart people in the Army too. We've been working on this for a while. Don't come in and tell me you've got the silver bullet here. Let's have a collaborative back and forth. So I think that's important, you know, for industry to do that. Chad, so you talked very broadly about your company's capabilities and what you bring, and certainly your experience in uniform and now in the civilian world. But can you talk specifically about your company? What are you doing to help modernize, train, deliver combat-ready formations during TIC?
Okay, hey, thanks a lot for that question, sir. So AeroVironment is committed to work with all the different military services. My job is to focus on the Army, and when you see me, when I come and see you, I mean, I've got 300 engineers behind me, guys that want to get after your solution. So I'd say the best way that we could partner is, one, just keep an open dialogue. You know, we're very fortunate to have General Rainey come to our booth at AUSA, and we got to spend a couple of minutes with him and talk about LRR and our next generation candidate for long-range reconnaissance. And we talked about, you know, take the nose cone off and hand it to him. He goes, what am I looking at? I said, a soldier could put this whole thing together in 4 minutes without tools. That's what we want. You wanted something that was tools assembly, we built it. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And he goes, well, does this thing do different payloads, different capabilities? I go, sir, there's 7 different payloads here on this tree. Not a single one of them is our payloads. We build the truck, we let other vendors build, you know, provide the payload solutions so that the ground force commander can have whatever they want to accomplish the mission that they're faced with. And how did that all become possible? Because we talked to Maneuver Seated, and we talked to Army Futures Command, and we talked to Aviation Seated, and FEL-CFT, and I could keep going on and on, but what is it that you're trying to solve? What are the problems facing our soldiers out there in the force? What problems do you anticipate? And I think if industry's doing the right thing, we're making it a little easier for you to engage. We should be very inquisitive in asking you what you need, and then trying to invest our dollars to help you. And so how does that work? Here's the insider baseball. If you want industry to do what you want, come up and develop the requirement. And when you have a requirement, it gets posted on the portal. We take a look at every single requirement that comes down for the Army. I personally download it. I have alerts set up. Anything that's a UAV, it's a drone, it's a launch effect, load ammunition, and we crash a work group on it, and we write the 20-page paper. If we can provide a solution, I mean, we are standing by because we really want to get after that. So one, engage with industry. Don't be afraid to partner with industry. I just talked to a great warrant officer in a combat unit recently. He says, hey, we're really interested in borrowing a couple of your aircraft to go to NTC. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. What's your timeline? He goes, hey, this doesn't constitute a contract. I'm like, yeah, I know it. I used to say the same thing, but yeah, believe me, the contracts, you've never been through the contracts process with the Army, or you would never say that, because you know when you were in it. It's tedious. It needs to be. But listen, partner with industry, put the requirement down, and if you talk to Maneuver Seated, they're just amazing at this. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Grabner, RRD, John Dudas, those guys talk to industry left of writing the requirement, and they write it, they own it, they get it approved through the chain of command. So it's not like, you know, it's industry's requirement. They're talking to us about what's the art of the possible now and the future, what costs less, what costs more. And we ask them, what's more important to you? MRR, is it man-packable, or does it need to be endurance? Do you want to be able to have modularity? All the above, yes. Okay, so how do we get that triangle balance so that it's an affordable solution for you? So talking to industry ahead of time, building requirement, and then opening up the competition. So just because you talk to AeroVironment doesn't mean we're going to win the competition. We still got to get out there and perform and earn your trust, and we got to deliver. And that's what we're excited to do too. And I think you'll find that the industry is real excited about the opportunity to engage with the Army, to understand your challenges and problems, want to hear what those are, and that we can offer solutions. But when you make a requirement, that sends a signal to my chain of command on the corporate side that, oh, they want this. let's invest some of our own money in it ahead of time and get a running start. So that's the cheat code, is engagement, showing the interest, and the requirement certainly formalizes your interest. All right, Ray, sorry for going for so long.
No, that was great. In fact, I'll pull on that string a little bit more. I mean, you have a kind of a unique view now, just really recently coming out of uniform. Now you BD guy.
Yeah, and I was in the requirement side in FALCFT in Army Futures Command, so.
You kind of described some of it, but how you get around that kabuki dance?
Yeah.
You know, because I mean, obviously in the military side, you're a little concerned. I've committed the government to a contract with no money behind it, all those kinds of things. Is there any real granular kind of thoughts you'd have? Or we can go back to that as well if you want to.
Yeah, and I don't want to put you on the conversational treadmill and repeat myself, but what the thing is I really do believe if you have an idea. I was just talking to a guy in the booth yesterday from one of the user reps for the Army, and he said, hey, we're really trying to solve this complex command and control. You saw the spaghetti chart up there that the CDID's made of how complex the battlefield is. He goes, how are we going to make all this talk and WinTAC, TAC compatible so that we have a single pane of glass like General Donahue always used to say? And I got my guy next to me, and he is an aerospace engineer who built his own airplane, and he's in business development with me, and he goes, we're already doing that. And then he goes, what? He goes, yeah, this is the Kinesis ground control station software. It's completely platform agnostic. We've integrated 20 different vendors into this so one soldier or Marine can control it all, and it all populates across ATAC, because ATAC is just an app in it, and WinTAC, it all populates through that. So why don't we give us a chance to come to you and do a demo? Like, when is General Baker ready? We'll come to Redstone and we'll just do a demo on the front yard, and we'll get a male model, a real good looking first lieutenant, not me, some guy who looks like a soldier, and he'll wear the kit, and then he'll show you how to do it, and then you're gonna put it on. But give the industry the problem, and then give us a chance to show you a solution, and let's get off the PowerPoint and do some showing. And then if we're missing the mark, also tell us. No, that's good, but we want to go this way.
Yeah. You know, to me, part of it, I do a little bit of industry work myself, is, again, the demo is really important, but it's got to be more than PowerPoint deal.
Yeah.
Number two, you think about a pilot, maybe a small little physical, no kidding in the ground stuff. And then industry puts some money in, government puts some money.
That's right.
We can get over some of those hurdles.
Yeah.
You know, the industry's willing to put some money for
That's
it.
right.
You know, if the government will also, Army in this case, will put a little bit of skin in the game. That way, I mean, you guys got to survive. I mean, a profit margin is fine. I mean, that's what you're in the business for. Otherwise, you go out of business. So I think, you were spot on with that.
So Ray, I do have one, you hit it. So right now, we've partnered up with General Atomics to make the Gray Eagle. We said, hey, wouldn't it be great to be able to shoot a switchblade off of a Gray Eagle to give the Army standoff distances? So Gray Eagle right now can fire Hellfire 11 kilometers. We modeled it out. We paid for all the integration, about $1 million between our companies, and we can go 140 kilometers with a switchblade. So from this point, though, really, this is my advice to Army, is like, if this is a capability gap you want to solve, now you have got to grab the baton and move it, because we don't own Gray Eagle. We don't. So if the Army wants to take it to the next level and solve a capability gap, we're doing what you said. We're investing. You came up with a solution, and we're ready to go. So that's just one example.
Thanks, Chad.
Hey, Ray, I don't know if I can
please
pile
jump in.
on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I understand that, the agile procurement process is always going to be a challenge, but one of the things we can do is that we just move a little bit further to the left as well, and we start doing a sharing of technology roadmaps. If I understand where you're trying to go from a training perspective for the next 5 to 10 years, and I can align that to where my technology roadmap, I think that's going to be an easier start than the procurement law that we have to try to maneuver through as well. So that's one of the comments I just want to add on to that.
Yeah, no doubt. Colonel Hankey, this is a follow-up to one of your comments you made earlier, and it goes, when you mentioned that you don't want to focus on being an expert in any individual platform, but bringing them all together, kind of how you described the Israeli defense, are you looking for a movement to do collective training as a whole? And if not, could you expand on what you're thinking about, if that makes sense?
I'll take a stab at that one.
Take a stab at it.
So, some of it is, we've, in the air defense branch in particular, based on the technical complexity, the need for expertise is obviously significant. Sometimes we've made that an end in itself and focused on the building specific expertise to a very deep level, sometimes more than is required, and not being able to actually utilize the capability or understand how it would be applied in real combat situations. As we bring in IBCS, which is the ultimate fire control for all of our future weapon systems coming in, what we're forcing everyone to do is think differently about the employment of capabilities. What I've asked our team to stop saying is, hey, IBCS, you can do anything. Well, that's not helpful when I'm trying to train a captain on how you can employ it. That's like going to a restaurant and not giving them a menu, but just describing the ingredients. So let's give them some menu options, and then we can work off of that. The collective training that supports that is crucial to that. And we've built TADS baked it right into the system, so that commanders can do that sort of training. And then being able to pull, just as we've done with Patriot for years, being able to pull that into Patriot training devices into national level exercises and federated exercises. So we can do that collective training both at the most junior, the unit level, and then all the way up into support a combatant commander exercise, depending on how we build the exercise design.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think it's probably a better question for Cadet Command, but I think for the two uniform members and then maybe our industry partners as well. It says what training should happen at West Point and ROTC programs to get officers, their future officers, ready to come into this fast-paced, changing by the second environment? I mean, march, salute, go to the firing range. But maybe there's some stuff in Cadet Command, if you have any thoughts about that, that we could, push this capability earlier in an officer's career.
So I guess I'll take a little bit of a comment at that and just say I would challenge the question to say I think a lot of that's already happening. Back to Chad's comments earlier about how your kids are a whole lot more proficient. You look at whether it's ROTC or West Point and the technology confidence that those young men and women are heading into our PME with is significant. It's monumentally different than what we entered the force with. So I think the reality is what they learn there is not only technology based, but for an area that they need to continue to learn is, again, what I referred to earlier as Common Core things. They're much more comfortable with data literacy than we were. And that allows us, with them understanding the dependencies that go across all of that, to build a little bit more of the specifics that Chad had mentioned, or excuse me, Glenn had mentioned earlier, into the branch or the regiment they're going to head. So I would challenge the question a little bit from a perspective, I think a lot of that's happening. I think a lot of what those young men and women are graduating with already challenges a lot of our institutional training to make it better every single day as it is. I don't know, Glenn, if you have any thoughts to add to that.
No, sir, I would agree. I think that the officers that we're seeing, the warrant officers and the young soldiers coming through are definitely, they come with a different set of skills. And I think that, from our pre-commissioning sources, we're getting, very high quality caliber of officers coming into us overall. And, as the Air Defense branch has been expanding, we've actually, been able to be, and gone from being a not as a popular branch to one of the more popular branches. So that's very encouraging. So we're getting very high quality officers who are succeeding. I would say that, the one thing that perhaps to add is also just, putting in a pitch for my counter-UAS hat is just, kind of understanding, the soldiers' skills on the battlefield are changing, and part of that is the UAS threat that we see is much wider than anything we ever saw in the Cold War when we were doing shooting helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft out of the sky. So it's more of there's an everyone element to this problem, and then just understanding things like everyone needs to understand a little bit about the electromagnetic spectrum. Everyone needs to understand a little bit about some of this low Earth satellite sort of thing. So some of those more technical skills, I think foundationally, what we're seeing is very, very solid.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you. We're actually pretty damn good. Sometimes we're hypercritical of ourselves, which is okay to a certain extent. But we got to recognize the glass is more than half full. And I'm a graduate RTC program out of then Madison College, now James Madison University. And I go back there quite often, and I'm amazed. I'm saying there's no way I would have got through this program. I mean, barely got through with, anyway, but they're training on this stuff. So I think, again, we got to recognize where we are good and where we're doing well, and focus on those gaps we've got. So, Doug, here's a question that, again, you've talked a little bit about, but perhaps you could give some more specific details. So it goes, Lockheed Martin as an organization is well integrated. Did you write this question?
Not
With implementing the U.S. Army's institutional training and transformation effort. Could you share how Lockheed is leveraging AI and ML technology to maximize both training opportunities and transformation efforts in a concentrated effort?
Yeah, but first let me start with the Go Dukes. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
That's from JMU for those that don't know. So, yeah, there's a lot of good, strong key technologies like AR and VR that we need to make sure we get into the warfighter's hands, because they can adapt to the need. Whether you're out in the field or you're doing a maintenance training or a pilot training, these can all be adapted. Just how the example I gave for Jaden Daniels from a quarterback perspective, there's really no limit to the AR VR technology. It's very tactical, so you can just take it home with you and use it over and over again. From an artificial intelligence perspective, you can come up with very standardized training as well. If I'm a teacher, I'm an instructor pilot, I might teach a little bit differently than the colonel. But through the use of AI instructors, you can do it all the same and then just deliver it differently depending on how the student is better at receiving that. I think simulation and modeling as well. You can come up with realistic combat scenarios. And we've talked a lot about the drones, from a counter UAV perspective. I think you can also implement them from a surveillance and real-time feedback as you have soldiers out there as well. So I think that those are probably 4 or 5 of the areas that I would get focused on as well. And then probably something else, we were talking about the West Point cadets, and I think that we also need to focus a little bit more on the cognitive failure. I think that we all know how fast we can run 2 miles or how many times I can bench 225, but I just don't know my load as a leader, and these are leaders at all different levels, and I think that we need to look at that from a mental resilience perspective as well. That was just wanted to add that in there.
Yeah, for sure, because the battlefield's moving fast and a lot of things are being thrown in.
If I could just add a comment on that, is, as I go out on the floor there, we do our industry speed dating. One of the things they tell you, make sure you tell everybody the same thing so no one has no one has an advantage. The one thing I've been telling everybody is, that sooner or later we're going to need a training device of some sort on this, whatever capabilities. So please have that in mind as you're developing this, both just to TADS, but also if there's a simulation, hey, maybe you should have an eye towards being able to integrate that into what the Army wants to do with next gen, future constructive training environment, things like that. But I think those are ones that, especially as a commandant, TADS devices, short of a full thing, those are great, because in addition to being able to be a little more affordable, also we're less likely to necessarily give those away to a ally or a partner in critical need, like we've done with some of our Patriot capabilities over the last few years.
One thing, if I could add, we've talked a whole lot in this panel about the outputs of training. I would challenge the team collectively. We're also looking for help on the inputs. And it seemed like a relatively basic question, but how can we leverage AI for things like POI development and review? How can we do doctrine writing a little bit more efficiently, leveraging AI? And we've asked a lot of partners, and the more you dig into it, the more that opens more different tunnels to go down, and really has proven more challenging than we expect. But again, we've all talked about how .mil-PF has got to be integrated, and we want to be sure that we are relevant training today, what we're seeing today in the operating environment. So one of the things that we're looking at across the TRADOC and CAC is how do we work the input side of this equation as well. So that's a cheap plug. If anybody wants to help with that, we're absolutely taking it, because that's going to drive the speed that the institutional Army is able to keep up with transformation and contact as well.
Yeah, does anybody else want to talk about the input side? Because I mean, I think that is absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I can just start. I think that, from an AI perspective, there's a lot of large language models that are being built today around the logistics piece of it, but not on the training side. So I completely understand what you're looking for. We need some LLMs that are based off of, training input. One of the things that we've, just early stages got involved with, and this is not a plug, and we're working with a university as well, is we've taken the entire flight manuals for getting your basic FAA certification, loaded those into AI LLMs, and then had that instruct a person straight off the street, in street clothing, what is it going to take, to get them from standard clothes to their FAA certification. And the results are pretty interesting right now, what you can do by just taking those basic docs and load them in, and that's all the input. Very early stages, but I think everyone needs a lot of help with that.
One area that FCO that we've done is our Director of Doctrine and Training has taken Camo GPT. So I mentioned earlier we were revising our mission essential task list, and with each one of those METs there's a specific checklist of what goes with that, and they've been using Camo GPT to help generate that, which is how we've been able to take all of our unit type metals, and within 9 months we've completely revised them. Normally that would be a multi-year process. The thing that we've learned with that is there is a upskilling on our workforce on how to use these tools that has gone with that. So we've been doing teamed with some universities, to include Cameron University, on how to train our doctrine developers, training developers on how to leverage the tools, because it's not intuitively obvious, but once they learn, it's extremely powerful.
I was talking to General Beagle yesterday, I guess it was, and he started talking about micro-learning and stuff like that. First, I didn't know what the heck he was talking about, but as he described it, you just think about anything that breaks in your house or in your car, you just go to YouTube and say, my air conditioner thing is messed up, how can you help me walk through that? I think that's a thing we could leverage for sure. Just little snippets of data, stay off TikTok, but so I just think, there's no TikTok people out here, but anyway, what are they gonna do to me? I'm retired 3 stars, not much they can do to me at this point. So, but I did a boat class the other day online, and it had some AI behind it, obviously, because depending on the questions you answered, number one, it would take you in different directions. Because my wife was doing it too, and she was going in a different place than I was going. She was going the smart way, I was going the dumb head knocking way. But that capability in our training to adapt to your answer that then gives you feedback as to what you're doing. Again, I don't know all the magic that happens behind the curtain, but is that something you guys are seeing, or any thoughts on that?
So I don't know about at FCO. We haven't experimented with anything like that at MISCO, but that absolutely. And I'm not sure if it was Doug earlier that talked about adaptive learning. Every one of our team has to leave with a same basic foundational level of knowledge, but they come in at a start point that's differently. Right. So there's absolutely space for that technology to be sure that we can ensure everybody, regardless of rank or what branch, or it doesn't really matter, they leave out with a critical capability and understanding. And again, back to the question you asked about Cadet Command or West Point, that allows all of them to get to the point where they're hitting the ground at the same point running. So I can't say that we've seen that, but I think it's a very promising discussion.
Yeah, I think most of my training early on for sure was all cookie cutter. Yep. I mean, everybody came, you got the same thing. Yep. And again, as you said, we've all got different experiences. We all learn at different speeds and all that. So I think being able to be adaptive that way certainly makes a lot of sense.
I think one area where that would be exceptionally helpful is, we teach MDMP for years, and we sort of teach it wrong, because I can't simulate the multi-echelon. That's good because everyone's doing it at the same time, and your next higher headquarters is only one step ahead of you. But when we train that in the schoolhouse, it's off of a static order. There is no robust HICOM that can help you with that. But if I could somehow build a AI-enabled environment that knows the order and understands the one, and then the units, we could train captains on that back and forth that happens in a dialogue that happens as they build out courses of action, and as the higher headquarters refines its understanding. Hey, this was Warner 1, now there's Warner 2, which changes these things. It would be much more robust training, which would be an area where I think we can use immediately.
Yeah, Ray, and we've seen it. It's very small scale, has not been scaled up. But just from a simple perspective, put on a pair of glasses, and you're taking apart your weapon. And as you're taking it apart, if you do something wrong or it's in the wrong order, it immediately shows up red, like why are you touching that, and then educates you through that. Also seeing it from a maintenance training perspective, your tank comes in and you're writing in there, and maybe your glasses see something that you didn't see, and so it gives you an error on that. And then when you go in to fix that, it also walks you through. I do think YouTube is great to be able to fix my Jeep on many occasions. If we can bring that to the military, it's going to be much more effective and efficient.
Yeah, I mean, most people know when you buy something, you got three things, right? It can be fast, good, or cheap, right? You can have two of those, but you can't have all three. You got to have to pick. So this question talks about faster. It's from a great soldier in the audience here, and it says, where could we go faster and assume more risk in training, and how can industry help us with that so we can transform faster? I mean, we're all about managing risks, so you know, what we do is inherently risky anyway, so we got to think about how do you manage that risk to a level where you can be right at that edge but not go over it to get this whole transformation to happen faster. Any thoughts? Anybody can pick up on that.
I guess I'll start with a comment I made earlier, and one of the challenges I talked about, we do soldier touch points historically, and then you take it to a unit, and a lot of that is risk-based. Well, we're not sure how this piece of equipment is going to absolutely respond in all these different scenarios, and so that's risk on industry, that's risk on the unit, and we're seeing that, frankly, together we're moving forward on that, because a lot of the experiments, and that's the basis of transformation in contact, we're all going to make mistakes. Something's not going to work exactly like we had planned it to work, and we need industry to be willing to underwrite that in some cases, and Chad, you mentioned that earlier, but we've also got to understand that something that we had figured would work 100% may not be the right solution, and there was a discussion recently that some of the technology that we had, even out at PCC-5, which had been experimented with, there were soldiers on the ground that said, that doesn't do what I need it to do. So I think really the risk is we're going to make some mistakes. And I think that's not a risk, it's a reality. To move at the speed we are trying to move, and I would argue have to move, we've got to be comfortable, and I think, again, that takes all of us, industry, academia, labs, and the operational force with the institutional force, to come to the table, and my boss says you can wring your hands or roll up your sleeves, but you can't do both at the same time. And we've got to be sure, there's a lot of people in the audience that aren't listening to me anymore, they're thinking about how do I do that? But the reality is, it's true, we've got to think about how do we all put some skin in the game, because we're all potentially, it's not a winners and losers anymore, except for are we getting the right capabilities to the soldiers and the formations to make them more lethal, and I think that's the right that we all have to be signed up for. So that's just my perspective.
Anything else?
I would say that, as we look at how transforming contact has been playing out, and I think there's some great success stories of doing things that were inconceivable. As Combined Arms Center finishes, does the finishing touches on the force design update for the medium brigade combat team, which this time last year that formation design hadn't even been to a CTC yet. I think that's an example of where we can go fast. But it goes exactly back to what General Beck said about where you accept risk. And if you look at each of the DOCMO PFP domains, there's places you're going to accept risk. You're not going to have the first unit equipped is going to be the one that writes the Army Techniques publication for you, not the schoolhouse, because if you wait for us to do it, it'll take years. And I just think getting us to all acknowledge that, which we've seen directly with Transforming Contact, is sort of the critical element of that. And you can go through all those domains, but it also gets back to there's an iteration process, because every unit that transforms is not going to be a one and done. And being able to not just resource as we put out the capability, but also resource the COEs to be able to do this work. I think that's one of the more significant challenges, particularly in the current environment, that could slow things down.
Hey Chad, somebody's been Googling your LinkedIn account, so this is about cross-functional teams. So you apparently were the future vertical lift cross-functional team, is that right?
Yes.
Hey, so they got spot on. So based on that experience, and now in your position now on the business side, the corporate side, industry partner side, what's your lessons learned from CFTs? And again, not throwing anybody under the bus, but how they operate, how they plug in, What's your observation on that?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of the best practices. Well, first of all, I was on the Future Vertical Lift CFT, and it's very hard to believe that a man my size worked on any team with vertical in the title, so I was very appreciative of that. But yeah, it's impressive when we had some just brilliant engineers on that Future Vertical Lift team, and then working with other guys like NGCB and LRPF, and and right now you get I think General Crooks is still with LRPF, and Kane Baker, General Baker with FPL CFT, and so on and so forth. It's just incredible just to have CFTs where you have a one-star general who's focused on a certain problem set that creates a lot of energy and focus. And it's not as broad as a seated. You need them both. Obviously I'm not the guy who determines what's important for the Army to pay attention to, but when we assigned 1-stars to get after these problems of modernization, you could see there was a heck of a lot of energy moving towards that way. And one thing my boss, General Rugen at the time, he said, don't be in the office, you need to get out there and talk to industry. And that's what I did, is because I was an operational officer. I did not know all the different capabilities that are out there. Next thing you know, I'm talking to a guy with a PhD who did a DARPA project on aided target recognition. And I'm like, talk to me about your software. Like, oh yeah, we've got this aided target recognition packet on capability on satellites. It's on every submarine in the fleet. It's on P-8 Poseidon. It's on MQ-9 Reaper. And now we're putting it into tactical UAS. And I didn't know that you could actually put that kind of technology all the way down into a tactical UAS until I went up there and asked. What I would encourage all the CDIDs, all the CFTs, and people in the user rep community is get out, go talk to different industry partners, see what they're doing, talk to their engineers, and then go talk to another industry partner and bring some of those same questions. When General Funk was in TRADOC, he told me, he says, one of the things I always do when I talk to industry, I go, talk to me about how you would solve this problem. And then he would ask the same question to a different team. And it says, it's kind of interesting how you get the same answer or you get different answers. And both can be useful. So that's what I would say, Ray, is the best lesson learned I learned being in that team was, I think you were more effective for the general you're serving by getting out on the road and being a foot soldier for the Army by just going around, not committing the Army anything, but having informed discussion, debate, and dialogue about how to fight the future formations and what material and solutions are available now. Over.
Yeah, I'm kind of a simple guy, obviously you can figure that out, but I did 4 tours in the House of Pain, the Pentagon, and I would always tell my staff guys, I said, look, if you're doing coordination by email and that's all you're doing, when the crap hits the fan on Friday night and the trogs in the basement of the Pentagon start cranking out those taskers, and you need 3 guys from G3 and somebody over in the Joint Staff to help you, if all they know you by is your .mil address, they ain't gonna be there for you on Friday night. But if you went to their office, sat down, shared a cup of coffee, talked about sports, they got pictures of their kids, talked about that, when the crap hits the fan on Friday night, they're probably gonna be there for you. We do so much virtually by email, which is powerful. It's one of the most powerful tools we do have. It's also one of the most dangerous tools we have. But you gotta get out and press flesh. You just got to. Yeah. Human connection is what this is all about. Yeah, virtual's all wonderful, but So, and speaking of that, so one of the questions here is, this will be probably our last one, talks, in Joint World, talks about our Navy and Air Force brothers. It says they talk about virtual, live, constructive, LVC. They also talk about Joint Simulation Environment, JSE. What are we doing? And again, we've all kind of touched on those points, but anything you guys would want to offer in the LVC or the JSE area?
So I guess I would submit a little bit above the MISCO level, but across the force, and I think Project Convergence is a great example of this. We absolutely know that we are going to fight as part of a joint force. And depending on what theater it is, some of the joint force may be a higher priority or higher supported requirement than the Army or vice versa. And I think what you're seeing right now, and General Hodney and General Miller talked about it yesterday, is as they head back out for the next iteration or the next phase of Project Convergence, we absolutely have to be part of the joint force. And so I think our simulations are simulating that. I think, frankly, our training, even for our most junior folks, We now talk about the Joint Force. We talk about the total Army. We talk about all those aspects where years ago we may not have talked about it. So I think it's an evolution. I think it will continue to evolve, but I would submit, and you look at things like next-gen constructive simulations that are going to replace the war sim. Those will have the ability where a lot of those capabilities we white card today, we're not going to white card anymore. They're going to play, or we bring those joint capabilities into, even in the dirt. I had the opportunity to sit with the previous CG at NTC, who was really excited as he had a significant air portion with fixed wing aircraft from the Air Force. We don't historically do that. So I think that the drive is there both from the Army and the Joint Force to ensure that we all understand we will only fight as a Joint Force.
Any other concluding comments from the team?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up JSC. I know we only have a couple seconds left, and JSC is Joint Simulation Environment. That's just the Air Force and the Navy today. You're not training on takeoffs and landing. You're actually training to be prepared for that day one flight with all the classified sensors. I think from an NGC Army perspective, there are probably some lessons learned that they can pull from JSC and bringing in the more classified, high-end day one, get ready fight into NGC.
The only comment I would have is I think it's important that the Army recognize there are organizations right now that can only do their collective training in a joint environment, like a BCD, a Air Defense Brigade, and AAMBC. So those joint exercises are absolutely critical. And in many cases, those are those units' only opportunity to have some sort of capstone event.
Jay, have anything, or are you good?
Yeah, just real quick, I would just want to hammer it and say, hey, we're here to partner with the Army, and everything that we build, medium range reconnaissance, long range reconnaissance, launch effects, loitering ammunition, is based on a requirement, whether it's from a Navy SEAL or an Army soldier or a team, and then our goal is to make it better than what you're even defining in the requirement. And I would just say, let's continue to partner so we can help close capability gaps, increase lethality and survivability for our soldiers on the ground. Over.
I'll take a chance here. I submitted a slide. Is there a slide in the deck? One slide. Probably not there. Don't worry about it. I'll describe it real quickly. So I used to use this slide that shows a C-17 doing an arrested landing on an aircraft carrier. And the question was, is this possible? It's kind of like if you're in the airborne, world. Is that airdroppable? Well, hell yeah, everything's airdroppable once. There it is. Yeah. So is that possible? C-17 arrested landing aircraft carrier.
Oh my God.
I don't know who that guy is, but he's got a lot of guts. Here's the thing: the Doolittle raid. What was the Doolittle raid? Right? We've been attacked. December 7th, 1941, in Hawaii. The United States was knocked on its back feet. The morale was low. President Roosevelt said, come up with something to attack the mainland of Japan. Reach out and touch it. So Doolittle came up with the idea. What aircraft was it? B-25. How many? 16. Not supposed to be on an aircraft carrier. They strip everything out of it, go towards the coast. They got found out, so they had to launch them a little bit earlier. They bombed Tokyo. It was tactically insignificant, but strategically it was huge. It was one of the raids the Japanese went to Midway, right, which was one of their largest defeats. So is it possible? I don't know. But you gotta think this way. I mean, Doolittle was obviously a guy thinking ahead, and the people who were around him. So that may not be possible, but who knows what, unless you try it. With these great leaders and these great industry partners, just about anything is possible. So I want to thank this great panel for your time and your effort and what you continue to do for our great nation. So thank you much, ladies and gentlemen.
Great panel and a great ending. Thank you. I'm Dan Roper, AUSA's Director of National Security Studies, and I just like to inform everybody, if you're not already aware, we've got a bonus event available for your participation at 1600 today, right here. General Rainey's going to sit down for a special session, Strategic Land Power Dialogue, that we, AUSA and CSIS, run together, and sponsored by General Dynamics. If you're available, I'd highly recommend you participate in that, or come watch it, be part of it, and get a good feel for that. Time now for our lunch and networking break, and look forward to seeing you back in here at 1400 with a fireside chat with the Sergeant Major of the Army, so SMA Michael 1. Thanks.